I think so many people want it to be effortless.
Yeah.
And they want it to be like, oh, they just have this talent and they just get up and open their mouth and it's awesome. But you're really approaching it like an athlete.
Yeah. And I'm not like crazy strict where I'm like, put that down. Yeah. Like that's somebody's hand. But I'm just like, okay, that's a choice.
You're not going to do it.
Right. I'm not. So in college, I was wrestling with a buddy.
Yeah.
And I remember him choking me. And I was like, hey, dude, I'm good. And he didn't hear me, but he kept on going. I was like, I'm good.
Yeah.
So as soon as I detect that you are even trying to mimic somebody, I'm a little bit out.
And so when it is critiqued, you're not just critiquing something that I'm doing. You're critiquing a part of me that I'm sharing with you. Don't be afraid to try something different. Dare to be creative. Stay authentic to who you are. Don't waste your time trying to be somebody else because the world needs you.
Yeah.
Authentically you.
Maliek.
Hey.
What's up?
Hey, man.
Welcome to Project Songbird. We got Maliek here. We also have Kamo in the corner.
Hello.
It's going to be fun. So, Maliek, we're just super excited you're here.
Yeah.
You are an amazing vocalist. I'm going to brag on you. You don't have to brag on you. I'll brag on you.
Thank you.
Honestly, I've been doing music for a long time, and you're one of my absolute favorite voices, my absolute favorite people to work with. So we just thought it'd be really fun if you came on and just kind of gave a big masterclass on just really helpful things for a songwriter, for an artist, for their voice.
Yeah.
All things voice technique,
Love
all
it.
things voice preparation.
Okay.
So that's kind of the heart.
I love it.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Okay. So first off, why don't you just share kind of when you started singing, what singing was like growing up, and kind of how you got here?
Yeah. So I started singing when I was about 5 years old. I just remember I have a very vivid memory of me putting a bucket over my head and singing the national anthem. For some reason, we heard the national anthem and the Negro national anthem every day at my school.
Okay.
So
I might be really white. I didn't know there was a second national anthem.
It's called also Lift Every Voice.
Okay.
You ever heard of that song?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I have some education to go in. I'm excited about that.
It's just like that. Lift every voice and sing. It's incredible. But I heard that and the national anthem and the Pledge of Allegiance every day in kindergarten.
Okay.
And so I remember coming home, putting a bucket over my head, and singing the national anthem. And my mom was like, "Hey,
that's a little weird.
I think you can sing."
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, whatever. And so then I fast forward a little bit, my mom started putting me in front of people choir directors and stuff like that. And I started to realize that I had something. Now, it didn't become a passion till probably third grade, I would say. That's when I realized I was like, I think I want to be a singer. I started doing theater shows, local things in Brooklyn. And my cousin was Nala in Lion King. And I was so inspired by that. I was just that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. So that led me down a path of okay, I'm going to pursue singing. What does that look like for me to find my voice? And so I just started any, I think, singer, they started to mimic their inspiration.
Yep.
And mine started with the oldies, whether that was Whitney Houston, Aretha Franklin, Mariah Carey, Luther Vandross, Teddy Pendergrass. And then, I also grew up in the 90s, so Usher. And then in the 2000s, when I found my own liking in music, Neo became my idol. And so I was I want to sing like him and write songs like him because he's an incredible songwriter. But that also led me down a path of theater. And so started doing theater, which led me to senior year. I'm trying to go to Juilliard, get an audition, don't go to that audition because I felt like God has called me somewhere else. And so that led me down a path of okay, what do I do with this talent that I want to pursue? Yeah. And that led me to worship leading. And so that's why I'm here.
Okay. Yeah. Also wedding band.
Yes. That's a crazy thing in itself. So Steel Toe was birthed out of a lot of musicians from New Spring Church. And so a lot of those musicians was I think we can do what we do at church. Yeah. But in a wedding setting. And so
explain the name.
So Steel Toe Stiletto. Rosangela, the one that is like the founding female vocalist on that. They wanted something that was gonna be like a staple. And the first time she wore steel toe stilettos at a gig, it was like, that's the name. And it's sassy and it's fun and it's like strong. And so I joined that band in 2018.
Okay. Give us a scope of, I know how big it is, but give the audience a scope of how big Steel Toe is.
Okay, so there's a parent group called Party Groove Entertainment.
Okay.
And so they have under them, like they first started Steel Toe. And now they have several other bands across the Southeast region. They have a band called Oxford Soul that majority, like they center around Atlanta.
Okay.
Then they have a band called Velvet Bay, which like reaches the coast. And like we travel, like, I mean, as far as Cancun, Chicago.
Jeez.
We've been to Washington State, which is
high
like
high end parties and weddings.
Pretty high end parties. It's like,
yeah.
I probably wouldn't have had it at my wedding because it would have been a little expensive.
Tens
but like,
of thousands.
It is so much fun to be a part of.
Yeah.
Sure.
How, like, when you sing for that, how long are you singing?
It depends, because there's some weddings where like they want the premium of premium packages. So they will have us set up in two different areas. We'll have a cocktail band, and that can entail of just instrumentalists, but also they will have like a dinner time set. And so we'll do like an hour dinner time set and then go to the actual like reception venue, which is usually not that far. And then we'll do a pre-party set, which is probably about like an hour and some change. And then we'll do a last party set, which lasts like an hour and a half. So it can range from 3 hours to about 5 hours of performance.
And you're not singing easy songs.
No, it's like, I mean, you got Unchained Melody and then you got Bruno Mars.
Yeah.
That's what I like. And so it varies from all different types of like genres and vibes. It's just so much fun though.
Yeah. So speaking of that, tell us how do you prepare for that? Like how, give us just an insight, helpful things. If I'm an artist, if I'm going to play a show, what do I need to do to start preparing for that show?
Yeah.
When do you start preparing? How are you thinking through that?
So depending on the show, or depending on like whatever venue I'm like, performing at. Let's take church, for instance. That's a very different style of singing. And so I will usually like the day before, so the morning of, I'm going to wake up early, probably about like 4 hours before I have to actually like sing at optimal level.
So that's, at optimal level.
Yes.
So you're like accounting for run and stuff. Okay.
Yes. So it's like my gathering is at 9:15, I'm going to wake up at 5.
Yep.
And so I'm going to get up. The first thing I'm going to do is down a 16-ounce bottle of water, just to maintain hydration. And then I'm going to be doing like low key warm-ups. Maybe that's some like light lip trills. Maybe that's some like revs with my voice is like just something light in the house, because I don't want to wake up my kids. I don't want to wake up my wife, but I also want to get myself a little bit warmed up. And then after I finish that bottle of water and I'm getting myself ready for the day, I'm moving, I'm stretching. I think one of the things that we forget about the voice is that it incorporates your entire body, not just your vocal folds. And so making sure that I am loose and lubricant in my whole body so that I can use every muscle that I need in order to perform correctly. And so after that, like after about an hour of getting ready, I'm going to get ready to get out of the house. And so that means I'm going to get a warm to hot bevy, which consists of, I like to keep mine clean. I don't do anything crazy. It consists of either just plain tea, or water and honey, or water, lemon, and honey. So I just try to keep it clean. And then once I'm in the car, I'm able to like get a little louder and get a little crazy with my warm-ups. And so just making sure I'm operating in the scale, like I am cognizant of like what keys I'm singing in that day. So I try to like go to the peak of that key, so I can stretch myself all the way there if I need to go there. I think a lot of people forget that like, hey, let's operate at the top of our range just to get there, so that if we do get there, if we do have to go there or we want to go there artistically, we have that opportunity we've been up there. And so I try to do that. And then by the time I get to the church, I'm going to be again, warming up, doing a lot more louder lip trills, a lot more higher range sirens.
Yeah.
And then I have a run through to warm up. And then by the time I'm 15, I feel like I'm at an optimal space to be able to like vocally get ready. Now, if I'm doing a gig like for Steel Toe or something like that, I am very much like going to prepare like almost all week. So I'm like learning new songs sometimes. A lot of times like a wedding party would want something that's completely out of the ordinary or that's very current and new, which is amazing because we are pretty flexible and we can do those things. But I'm learning songs. I'm learning stylistically how to like change and shift my voice as well. And so usually that consists of like an all day kind of practice, especially like the day before I'm doing a gig. It's like, okay, I'm getting ready, not only musically and mentally, but I'm preparing my body for it. I'm usually going to take like I'm not going to do anything crazy strenuous the day before. And then the day of, again, doing the same things that I do for a gathering for church, but it's going to be a little bit more strenuous of like making sure that I'm ready to give the full 3 to 5 hours.
Yeah.
I also use these things called Grethers pastilles. That's something that maintains my voice throughout the day.
What is that?
So it's basically like it's a lozenge, but it's more like a lubricator for your voice, like kind of like what coats your voice like honey does.
Yeah.
So that you have a smooth palate to be able to operate on. And so I pack a lot of those in my bag when I do a show like that. And so even in between sets, I'm like keeping one in my mouth. During a set, I'm keeping one in the side of my mouth just so I can stay lubricated throughout the set. And then I'm just mindful of like throughout the set of like how I'm singing so that I don't give like 110% during that time.
Man, that's so much. I feel like someone might see you singing and like, oh, cool. Like you just showed up and started singing.
Yeah.
But it's like constant work to get there, constant work throughout a set.
I, as somebody who do music with you, literally had no idea you did any of that stuff. Especially waking up for. I mean, I knew you wake up early in the mornings, but waking up early to do all of that.
Yeah,
it's a lot of work.
It's wild, but like I'm telling you, it pays off to like maintain health. But then also like you don't just go into a game, a football game, like cold turkey, you know? And so like you're warming up those muscles, getting them ready to like do the thing that you're called to do. So like when it comes to my voice, I'm pretty strict when it comes to my routine.
Yeah.
Can you also chime in on the 3 straws thing?
Yeah.
I think that's a really helpful thing. That would help me when you said that.
I just saw Maliek walking around with straws in his mouth all the time. And I'm like, I got no idea what he's doing, but it's working.
So I give this shout out to Ron Hendricks. He is at our Powdersville location. And he's been a choir director, music teacher for many, like 30 plus years. And I remember when I first went to our Powdersville campus and he was like talking about straw phonation and like what that does for your vocal folds and like getting rid of phlegm and clearing out some of that gunk that's usually there. And I swear by it. Like it helps me, like, especially if I'm like fatigued or like I'm just kind of like struggling to get where I need to go.
Or you might be coming off of a cold.
Yeah, something phlegm. Like that. It's like, it's really good to smooth out that phlegm in your vocal folds. And so I use a straw. Like I try to do like, if you have a coffee stirrer, like usually those very skinny straws, like if you want a good amount of tension, I say start with 2 because you want something that's going to like tighten and like get those vocal folds massaged. And so like start with 2 and then loosen up with 3 so you can get a little bit more. And if you have like a fast food drinking straw, totally fine too, as well. And so I just do those and do my I start with a light rev, like through the straw, and then I start to do like some scales just so I can like see where my range is. But then I also sing a song like that I'm about to sing or something that's like, hey, I feel like I'm not hitting these things in my range, so I'm gonna sing this song through the straw until I'm smoothed out. And usually like after I'm done with the straw, I'm like, I'm good to go.
I'm sorry, just to double down on that. You also mentioned to me before how when you get to a point where you're at a break in your voice, you sit in that spot and smoothen that pitch out.
You do. You want to go back and like if you're like woo, and you hear I'm like, okay, hey, that's where I'm cracking the most. And so like I just go and smooth that spot out again, like over and over again, and I just test that range until we get to another place.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I had a singing teacher. He did something called the Blaylock method.
Okay.
Where he would pinch his cheeks.
You got to teach me this because I'm.
He would literally sing everything like this.
Oh wow.
And his justification was when you pinch your cheeks like that, it's physically impossible to swallow. So he was like, there's mechanisms that are trying to swallow, and you get that out of the way to help your voice like be clear. So I wonder if the straw stuff has something similar with like swallowing or something. I don't know.
Possibly.
It's very interesting.
I don't know. But that sounds awesome too. I might try that.
Yeah, you should definitely try that. Talk about on not like a show day. What are you doing? Because I'm assuming you can't just show up and be great. I'm assuming you're doing something daily, exercise wise, just to stay strong. Because if I did the amount of singing you did, I would not have a voice.
Yeah. So I tell people all the time, like, if you're learning how to sing, like, you got to exercise, right? Just like building muscle, like you do it every day, increments at a time. And you get stronger as you continue to do that. And so I try to do like now on days where I'm off, depending on like if I just had a gathering or a gig or something like that, I'm going to do more of a rest day, but I'm still going to like, I'm going to talk a certain way. I'm going to pitch my voice a certain way to make sure I'm resting well.
There have been times where Maliek like has like a meeting with us as like his team, and he's like, all right, guys, so I'm going to talk like this.
Well, you got to like take care of it, man.
Yeah.
So like just like changing the pitch of my voice, even like Kamo said, and just like maintaining that rest. But I'm still going to like work out. Like, I mean, right before I came here, I was like, I have to talk. And so I'm going to work out my talking voice.
You're warming up to talk.
Yes. And like people don't think about that, but like I was also a cheerleader. And so like learning how to make sure I shouted from my diaphragm, or that I spoke well, not articulating, but I'm like technically speaking well, so that I can like not lose my voice, because I still have to maintain my singing voice as well. And so on days where it's post the gathering, I'm doing more of a rest, but throughout the week leading up into said gathering or a gig, I'm going to be doing like full on exercises for at least about 45 to an hour of like singing, whether that's like I'm just worship singing, or I'm going to pick a song that I like think is hard and I want to like nail it, or like try to get something different out of it, to where I feel like, okay, I just did a good strenuous workout. My voice feels worked out. Okay, let's warm down. And I'm good throughout the rest of the day.
Yeah.
So
I think so many people want it to be effortless. Yeah. And they want it to be like, oh, you know, they just have this talent and they just get up and open their mouth and it's awesome. But you're really approaching it like an athlete. Yeah. You got game days, you got rest days, you got like exercise and training days. There's Kylie.
Yes.
That's always really funny when she's on vocal rest. She brings a little sign around.
Oh, yeah.
That says that she's not talking to anybody.
She's taught me a lot, like for real. Like we
make fun of her for it.
She's, but like she takes so seriously vocal health. And like I've seen her do like, and I'm going to just say the term shows, but like literally show after show after show after show after show. And then like gathering after gathering after gathering. And I'm just like, what in the world? This is amazing. Yeah. But I've also seen her like show up with a sign or like draw something on the iPod. And I'm like, okay, like I can implement some of those things where I'm like the most like, if I know I'm going into something that's like crazy, like let's take a gauntlet, for instance. Like, okay, that week is wild.
Explain. You get like a summer camp where you're singing every morning, every
night. You're like, hey, how do I like stretch myself? She taught me a lot about percentages, and like I knew like I'm like all gas no brakes kind of guy, and so I'm like I want to just go. And she really taught me how to like look at like, hey, what can I get? What can I actually give for this like portion of the gathering, and what can I like not? Well, how can I step back? And so like she's taught me a lot about percentages and like, hey, what does 85% look like for you to sing, and then this sound just as good? And I'm like, okay, great. Never thought about that, but here's how this sounds. What do you think? And she's like, that sounds great. Let me get that, because it gives this, it emotes the same. It leaves like very similar amounts of power, but you're not giving and exhorting yourself so much to where you're like completely out.
I'm sure you do that for rehearsals too.
Oh yeah.
It's like, how do you manage that tension of like wanting to rehearse enough,
Yeah.
give your bandmates enough, give the audio engineer enough, but also not like wreck your voice before everyone's there.
Yep, for sure. I think it's like collaboration. And so like I'm gonna always ask like, hey, is this good? Like usually I'm pretty good at being like, okay, I'm gonna give enough. And then if I feel like, hey, you're doing too much, you need to back down. One of my vocal coach, like Karen Snurd, like she talked about having a fixed point of reference to like bring you back to technique. And so mine is like specifically at church is looking at teleprompt. And then usually if I'm on a gig, I'll pick a person to be able to like look at to be like, oh, that's my fixed point of reference. Like you're getting off of like technique. You need to pull back a little bit. And so like having that fixed point of reference, I'm like, okay, this is run through. I need to probably like chill before I get into an actual gathering, or it's like I'm in the middle of a set for like a dinner set and I'm like, what's the song that they asked me to sing? Just the Way You Look Tonight. And I'm like trying to be creative and having fun, but I was like, I look at Rosangela and I'm like, she's not doing the most. Yeah. I don't need to do the most.
For a dinner set, people are eating dinner.
Right. Like they don't need to be like,
performance as much.
Right. They don't need to be looking at you. They need to be focused on their food. And so like you need to sing, chill, and a little bit more calm. And then when we get to the party set, it's kind of like, lose my inhibition. I can have fun, all gas, no breaks. And so just realizing what is that fixed point of reference for you, and going back to like, hey, what is good technique? What is going to help me not to fatigue myself to the point where I don't have goodness to give when it comes to your vocals?
Yeah.
That's good. Can you talk about diet too? Okay. And how even what you consume affects your voice?
Yeah.
Being like caffeine.
For sure.
You've told me not to intake menthol.
Yes. It's not good.
A lot.
It's not like, it just doesn't do what I think it does a numbing effect rather than it does like soothing effect. And so I tell people not to take menthol. I tell people not to take caffeine because it does affect the quality of your voice.
Yeah, caffeine dehydrates.
It does. It just dries you out. And so just like making sure that like, and I'm not like crazy strict where I'm like, put that down. Yeah. Like that's somebody's hand. But I'm just like, okay, that's a choice.
You're not going to do it.
Right. I'm not. But
if you're giving someone advice, you would say probably not.
But so even on that, so I know you drink coffee.
For sure.
Like what is a healthy, moderate amount to maintain health, but also enjoying your life?
I do like if I'm going to do it, it's going to be when I know I'm not singing. And so if I'm just chilling out throughout the day, I can usually have a cup of coffee in the morning, like a latte in the morning. And then I'm like, all right, I'm done for the rest of the day. Yeah. Like I'm okay. And I usually do decaf. Like I don't know what people are getting. Like if they get coffee for the caffeine, I get it for the taste. I like the taste of coffee. And so I'm going to get a decaf coffee, which is going to be less strenuous on your vocal cords anyway. And so, decaf coffee is my way to go. And then when it comes to like, what I'm gonna eat, I'm probably I shouldn't eat like dairy and stuff before you're gonna do something like sing because it's gonna phlegm you up. Lemonade, horrible. Like, do not drink lemonade because it gives you like thick mucus, and that's just gonna like affect how you sing. It's wild.
That's funny because lemon water, is good.
It's something different. Like if
maybe
you get,
all the sugar.
Yes, it is all the other stuff that goes into lemonade. It thickens your saliva and it makes that phlegm just instantly appear. It's wild. And then if you want some help with inflammation, there's a tip. I like to down a bag of salted chips. Wow. It helps with inflammation. I usually keep a bag of Lay's on deck, like when we have the Chick-fil-A bags.
Yeah,
just down that, and it like helps with that salt. That's good helps with the inflammation. So
yeah, salt helps with hydration. Yeah, a lot of good things. Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just thinking about all the things. I'm learning some things.
Like,
no,
that's
really
great.
Fun.
I love it.
Okay. I don't know. We didn't really plan some of these questions. So I'm just going to ask you some things.
Come on.
If you take a second to think, that's okay. What are some of you could say were some or currently are still some of your biggest challenges when it comes to singing? And it could be like, this was a challenge. I figured this out though, solved it. Or it could be like, this has always been a challenge.
So this is a challenge that I can go back to when. So in college, I was wrestling with a buddy, and we were being too rough. Yeah. And I remember him choking me, and I was like, "Hey, dude, I'm good." And he didn't hear me, but he kept on going. I was like, I'm good.
Yeah.
And like I got done and I didn't like, I was like, oh my gosh, like what? And he was like, he was distraught because he didn't realize what he did. But I also realized that like my falsetto was never the same. Like I went to coaching, like my lessons, all my falsetto was just like, it was gone. And so I felt like I had to like lean on like my belt and like kind of my head voice, but like more like a mix, you know, heavy on my mix. And so, falsetto's always been a challenge for me ever since then. And it's been better, but that's something that I'm consistently working on, is learning how to trust my head voice. I think it was more mentally, right? I think that like singing, again, not only operates your whole body, but it is a mental game.
Yeah.
Like if you don't feel like you have it, you won't have it. And if you like psych yourself out nervous wise, like to where you're like, I can't do this, you probably won't be able to do it.
Yeah.
You even if you have the skill, you won't be able to do it because mentally you're gonna block yourself from being able to like focus on the vocal folds the way that they need to work.
Yeah.
And so I just remember my coach being like, hey Maliek, like I don't think that this is a physical thing. I think that you're able to operate in your falsetto. I think mentally you're just not ready to let go enough to like allow that to happen. Because I kept on like remembering what took place and me losing my voice and me being so mad at him. And I was like, I'm associating my falsetto with like anger and what took place that day. And so I'm still like learning to trust it, but it's something that it's a huge challenge when it comes to my vocals.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What are some challenges? You work with a lot of singers. So you in the wedding band, you got lots of singers you're working with, but also like throughout the years in church, you've worked with lots of singers in theater. What are just some of like the biggest challenges you see in other people that you're like, man, if they could think this way or do this, it's gonna serve them so well? You can give a couple too.
I think what comes to mind first is people finding their own voice. I think we live in a culture where we mimic a lot of artists, which is like, it's not a bad thing. I think that like, that's how you learn to sing like yourself. But doing the work to actually find your vocal, I think in the worship space, right? We have so many people that, we look up to and we want to emulate like how they lead and how they sing. I even remember when Stephanie Gretzinger came on the scene. Amazing power, beautiful voice, loves Jesus in the way that she leads. Just amazing. But I remember hearing a lot of people that tried to mimic the Bethel sound, that still try to mimic the Bethel sound. And I'm like, that's awesome, but what do you sound like? And so I think finding your own voice is a big thing that I would say is a challenge within like singers and stuff like that. And then like comparison, like alongside of that, it's like, hey, like you sing like you and like don't compare yourself, but maybe learn from someone. Like if I'm going to be honest, like and I've told her this, like, but Rosangela, I used to idolize that woman. Like she is probably one of the best vocalists that I've ever been able to work with personally. No, I will say she is. She really is. Like she has an incredible gift. And I used to just be like, man, I'm never going to be able to like do the things that she does. But when I sit next to her, when I like sing next to her, I'm like, I'm just mesmerized. And I'm learning to learn from her instead of compare myself to her. Because that diminishes the gift that I have. It disqualifies myself when I'm like, no, like I am qualified to be in that same space. Now she has a different gifting and ability that I want to have. And so like, what can I do to learn from her? What are the things that she's doing or the type of singers that she's learning from, to be able to do those things? And so I wish that singers, especially like in a church space, don't compare yourself, find your own voice, because it's there. And that's what God wants, and that's what our congregation wants. But even outside of that, like as you're looking at other artists and what they're doing, don't compare yourself, because you are exactly what people need. They don't need another copy of Billie Eilish or Post Malone. Like they are very, very uniquely themselves. And so how do you find your own voice in the midst of the mimicking and imitating and learning from them, but find yourself in the midst of that?
I'm so glad you brought this up because I was literally going to ask you about this. And I think there is a lot of beauty in finding your own voice.
Yeah.
So even to go deeper, because it's not just about not mimicking. It's about like, how do I embrace my voice? So I won't speak for you because I have my own thoughts, but how do you appreciate your own voice and learn to see the beauty in it and the uniqueness in it? And grow what is good about your voice.
I think like understanding your strengths.
Yes.
And highlighting those rather than like so focus on your weaknesses.
Yes.
I think a lot of times singers can be like, well, I can't do this or I can't do that. And I'm like, that's awesome, but what can you do? And I know personally what I'm good at and what I'm not.
Right.
And usually I'm gonna lean more into like what's strong and what's like I know that I love my mix and I love my belting voice and I love singing high. Like that's just what I like doing. And so I'm going to choose that route normally to put myself in a pocket, not to take away like stretching myself and maybe, hey, let's take this down a key so that we can like work on that lower register and be okay with that lower register.
Yeah.
But like, hey, first let's highlight some strengths without looking at the weaknesses. What's good about your voice? What do you like texture-wise, tonally? What do you like personally like to sing and not just like what you think other people like to hear from you? That's how I've like learned to find myself and even like I think getting good feedback for when you do sing like yourself and don't sing, and when you make choices that are like so you, like taking that feedback and legitimately taking it to heart and being like, okay, like they like that. And that was authentically me. That wasn't me trying to be someone else or trying to do something that someone else did, mimic it in a way that like makes it like myself. And so I think that when you find those spaces of feedback when you did something creative that was uniquely you, to like cherish those and continue to replicate and grow in creativity in that as well.
Yeah. That is incredibly invaluable because I don't think a lot of artists realize we don't give people enough credit for what they can hear as an audience. So as soon as I detect that you are even trying to mimic somebody, I'm like a little bit out. Like I'm like a little bit like less engaged in the song because I know that you're trying to mimic the Billie Eilishes or the Post Malones, and so you as an artist, as you're trying to build a fan base and a movement around your music, it's really, really important to blaze your own trail.
Yes.
Because you want people to be in on you, not a carbon copy of somebody else.
Exactly. And there's a lot of that going on.
And that is your voice is integral to that.
Yep.
And my favorites are like right now, Forrest Frank is so popular.
Yeah.
And like
nobody sounds like him.
Nobody sounds like him. And on like paper, especially when he was doing Surfaces, like no one was sitting around being like, this guy's a vocalist.
Yep.
Yeah.
But he used his voice so well.
Agreed.
And his songwriting so well, his production so well. And so I think he's someone in my mind I'm thinking of as like, he's one of one.
Yeah.
He leaned into it and
did.
it paid off huge.
I agree.
That's the thing is like, it's about skill.
Yeah.
But you don't need to be the most skilled vocalist. You can still be this beautiful, amazing, unique artist without having the technical skill to go 100% all the time.
I agree.
So, yeah.
I think John Mayer had an awesome moment where he had like vocal surgery in his career and his voice changed very differently after that.
Oh, wow.
And so it wasn't as high. He didn't do the breathy thing anymore. It didn't feel as poppy. But then he immediately came out with like this nice folky album where he's just like really low in his range and like just a lot of like songwriting. Just like he's out in Montana just writing songs that are like acoustic guitar in his voice. And it's just cool to see like, hey, he felt like he didn't need that anymore. So
come on.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Some John Mayer.
Okay, Maliek, fun question.
Okay.
There's a lot of opinion.
Okay.
Do you think anybody could be a pretty good singer? Like,
Ooh,
could you take someone
my gosh.
with like enough reps and exercise and training and all the things and get them to where like they could be on a stage at a church with like and leading lots of people, or they could do shows? Like, how would you?
Like, what if they're tone deaf?
All right, we'll take out like the less than 1% of population that's legit tone deaf. Okay, I don't think there's many people that actually are
same.
Tone deaf. We use that word too liberally.
I would say that most people, if not everyone, excluding that very small minority, has the ability to sing.
Yeah.
Now, personally, I don't think I can take someone from 0 to 60. But I've seen it happen.
Okay.
Where like I had a vocalist, a part of my team in Colombia, and she was like not the best, but I was like, hey, you know what? Like, I'm gonna take you under my wing and we're gonna see how this works. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that like she started to do things like I did them. And I was like, that's what a mentor is supposed to do. Like you're supposed to like mimic them and then find yourself within that mimicking, like kind of like what we talked about. And like she's amazing now. Mm-hmm. Like, and it wasn't to like, I wouldn't credit that all to me, obviously, but she put in the work and she was willing to take the feedback and like do the things that she needed to do to get where she is currently right now. And she's an amazing worship leader. But I'm like, I think that the people that want to be able to sing will be able to sing because of like the dedication that they put into it.
It's the work.
I think it's 100% the work. It's like you're gonna put in the dedication to go to lessons, to get feedback, and to make changes. Then I think that you can see good results. They may not be perfect, but they'll be good enough.
Yeah.
But I think it takes the work because many people would be like, yeah, I want to be able to sing. And then they won't have any extracurricular things to do. And then they wonder why 3-4 years from now, they still sound the same. I'm like, you didn't put any effort into it. You're not just going to become a baseball player by looking at baseball.
Yeah. So. Man, I will say though, I think one of the hardest things is taking feedback as a singer. I've seen people take feedback as guitarists, as drummers. I mean, I think any creative field is a little harder naturally because there's a lot of subjectivity. There's a lot of like, this feels personal.
Yeah.
But for some reason, singing feels like the hardest thing for people to take feedback
It is a very vulnerable thing. I literally just wrote about how like music in general, it cuts through like the soul and it speaks to us. I really do think that it speaks to our spirit in a lot of ways and like it speaks to our emotions. And so like when someone is singing, they are bearing a part of them that is like leaving them just exposed. And so when it is critiqued, you're not just critiquing something that I'm doing, you're critiquing a part of me that I'm sharing with you.
Yeah.
And so I do think that there's a tender space there, and being able to maintain that tenderness and giving feedback, but also like, I want people to know that please don't hear what I'm not saying, but like, you got to learn how to like take it on chin sometimes.
How do you do it?
It's like, I don't take myself too seriously, but then I also like, I want to come into a space with a collaborative mindset. Yeah. Like I never want to come into a room where I'm like, yeah, I know it. I got it locked. That no one can tell me anything. I'm like, I want you to be able to like, I want anybody from a new person to someone that's been in the field for 80 years to be able to tell me like, hey, Maliek, like, I thought that this was a little funky.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, okay. Like, depending on your level of expertise, I'll definitely be like, that was interesting that you thought that, but I will at least take it and maybe there was some truth in that.
Yeah.
And I will be able to be like, okay, what can I apply from what that person just said? Whether they have, like I said, minimal experience or the maximum. Yeah. So
again, I can attest to that as somebody who does music with you, that when I've given you feedback the few times that I have, you listen to me. I'm really grateful.
Yeah, I got to. Yeah. I can't be out here like not being a sponge.
And also like, among the many things that foster trust between me and you, that is one of the bigger things that as you and I collaborating in a musical context, when I see you taking my feedback, I know that you trust me and I know that we can work really, really well together.
Yeah, for sure.
That's important to consider too. If you are in a collaborative environments, when you reject or take feedback, depending on what the feedback is, it does make a case for whether or not you're actually interested in hearing what other people have to say, or like, and so, you know, all of that with a grain of salt. Like, some people might be saying stuff that is wild and not helpful. But just beware of that as you're collaborating with people.
Agree.
Do you do anything differently with the way that you prepare for recording in a studio context?
Ooh, so yes, and like I'll prepare vocally the same way, but I think mentally so different. Like live is plug and play. Whereas studio is like, it is work in a way that I've never experienced before. And I would say that I'm more on the beginner side of studio work. But I've like been able to work with people like yourselves, and like I'm telling you, Kylie Odetta has this like, she's locked when it comes to like how she does studio stuff. And like I've done it with her a couple of times now, and I've learned a lot from her about pacing and just like mentally being prepared to like work through something, to iron it out. And I even think like coming into a space like a studio space, being willing to be like the most collaborative that you probably have ever been. Because there's so many voices. Like if it's just you and a producer, that's different. But in my context, there was a lot of people in the room. And so they're giving differing opinions, but you're coming together to make it sound like the best that it needs to. And so like, being a rubber band is so key in a studio as a vocalist. And so you never know what your producer is going to be like, hey, I didn't like that, but can you do this instead? Or like, I love this, can you do more of this? And it was like maybe the top of your range. And you're like, this is wild. But thinking about how to like work out sections, like I thought it was just like, let's just do a bunch of takes and like get it. It's like, no, hey, this take was really good, but like this portion was not good. And I'm like, I never knew that that's how that worked. And so just having a mentality of like being flexible, being collaborative, because your voice is not the one that's like the only thing that matters. Because we are all like, everybody in the room that's working on said project is trying to make it the best it can be. And collaboration is not one person coming up with the idea, but it's like coming together to bring out about the best result. And so,
do you feel like the first few times you recorded into a microphone, were you surprised at how you heard your voice differently and what it exposed as opposed to just singing? You have experience singing to a microphone
for sure,
like interviews and stuff like that, but for recording, does it change your posture a little bit in your approach?
It does, because I think for me, like specifically having cans and singing is very hard for me, because I feel like I lose the authenticity of my voice. And that's one of the things that I won't say the word fear, but I'm hesitant to be able to sing in a studio, because I'm like, I don't know how this is going to actually sound. I hope they keep the authenticity. And even like mentally, I don't feel like I sound like myself with cans on. And so like trusting that my voice is going to be like authentically taken care of. But then also trusting my gift as a vocalist, like, okay, even though it sounds different, I know what I sound like. And so just maintaining like confidence in the gifting that I have, it really does help, but it is very different than singing with in-ears in a live setting, than singing in a studio where everything is isolated and you just hear raw vocal, and like learning how to not appreciate the difference, but like work with that difference has been very key in like how I approach studio sessions.
So helpful for me. You said it's work.
I think that was helpful for me to hear too.
I think I'm going to take away from this, when I'm preparing someone to come in and sing, I need them to have the expectation that this isn't going to feel as fun as when they sing live.
No.
It's not going to feel like when they sing it in their bedroom and it's intimate and it's like their time. This is work to get this product the way that everybody wants it to be. And I think that's so hard, because people come in not thinking that. And they're just expect this is going to be fun. This is going to be easy. This is going to be just like when I sing it in my room or at a small coffee shop or on stage. And it's like, I think that I'm really realizing right now, that's what destroys people in that moment. Because then they start singing and they're realizing it's not those things, and they take that out on themselves. Like, I just don't like this. This isn't fun. And it's like, now I'm realizing they just came in with a different expectation.
I agree.
Of what to put in and get out of this process.
And it can be very discouraging.
Yeah.
But if you allow yourself to think like it is going to be work, it can become fun.
It can be, yeah.
And, it can become like very, how do I put it? Like, I like a challenge. And so like approaching it in the sense of like, oh, like I can do this. And, I can work this out. Like I think it can become way more enjoyable, and you can partner with the process rather than like fight against it.
Yeah, all about expectations.
It is like 100%. I agree.
Yeah. I'm like, this is awesome. I feel like I learned a lot.
Come on, thank you.
You got any other last closing thoughts or insights for us?
I would just say go sing. Like for vocalists, like. Put in the work to be able to like learn how to be the best vocalist that you want to be, right? And like, don't be afraid to try something different. Dare to be creative. Dare to like blaze your own path, as you said, Kamo, and making sure that you stay authentic to like who you are. Don't waste your time trying to be somebody else, because the world needs you. Yeah, authentically you, regardless of where you are in your journey. Like, continue to find what you sound like. Continue to find what you actually like, and be creative in that lane instead of trying to emulate and mimic what other people are doing. So.
Yeah, you want to sing us out?
Oh wow,
I was literally gonna be like, all right.
Sing us out, Maliek.